Oh. First, I want to thank you guys so much for your reactions and sending in more questions after part 1 went live. I truly enjoy these Q&A sessions because often when I'm having these discussions, I feel like shared my story and how we come to this podcast. But the beauty of Q&A is it fills the gaps of any questions you may have, how I ended up on this journey and what's to come because we have great things to come. More about that towards the end of the episode. How do you divine? Q&A, unfiltered, part 2. First question. What inspired you to start this journey of self-discovery, accountability with radical self-love? That's a beautiful question. What inspired me to start this journey? I became a mom early on in my life. That's what my husband and I planned. If you're new here, I've been with my husband since we were 18 years old. We knew we wanted to have kids early because we wanted to grow with them and also be old enough to still be in the know when they're teenagers. So my first daughter I had when I was 22, going on 23 years old. And having kids early definitely forces you to be very accountable for your time, as well as a mom. Made it very clear that if I was going to care for myself in any way, I need to make it a priority while prioritizing my daughter at the time. So I would say what inspired this journey is motherhood. Truly, I am very passionate about being a mom and I want to be very involved in their lives and support them in all of their endeavors. And in order to do that, I realized that you can't pour from an empty cup. And as a mom, we often feel that everything is our children, but actually we can never give them everything unless we pour into ourselves, unless we feed our own seeds. So very early on, I had to learn in the hardest way that in order to be the best version of a mom to my daughters, I had to show up as the best version to myself. So I will say that what inspired this is truly being a mom and learning how to balance being a mother at an early age. And now I have 2 daughters and seeing them just grow and learn through life reminded me of 2 things. Children will do what you tell them to do, but more importantly, they will do what they see 100% of the time. So I don't have room to play around. I don't have room to take for granted my lifestyle or how I care for myself because I don't want my daughters to inherit any bad forms of kind of burnout, right? I think as Black women, we tend to lead the charge in all things, check the statistics. And in leading the charge, we tend not to care for ourselves in the way that we should, not just exterior, because we the cutest out here. In terms of true wellness internally. So I would say what really inspired this journey of self-love and self-discovery is really always wanting to feel well for myself. Growing up as a child, we didn't necessarily have time to focus on wellness. It was getting things done and moving and grooving. And this is something that always bothered me. I always wanted to move at a pace that allowed wellness to be a part of the conversation. Not having that growing up, once I started to create my own family and my own life, I realized how important that was and made it a staple in my life. What inspired the journey is knowing what it feels like to go through life not being well. Next question. How did growing up as a daughter of Caribbean immigrants shape your views on strength, self sacrifice, and womanhood? Wow, that is a loaded question. So, if you're new here, both my parents are from Jamaica. I was actually born in Jamaica, came to the States when I was 4 or 5 years old, traveled back pretty frequently almost every other summer, and also started high school in Jamaica because my parents believe in academic excellence. And if you know nothing about the island of Jamaica, you should know that the average GPA in Jamaica is 4.0. We're a smart bunch of people. So I started high school in Jamaica, again, reinforcing that academic excellence was important. So, yeah, I'm Jamaican. I became a citizen of the United States when I was a teenager, when my mother became a citizen of this country. So, how did growing up a daughter of Caribbean immigrants shape my views on it's the question says strength, self sacrifice, and womanhood. So, I'll take it as one word at a time. So, I would say my viewpoint on strength as a child of Caribbean immigrant, I would say meant perseverance, right? Moving forward, powering through adversity and ignorance. It meant strength was also, not showing when things bothered you, when people that you cared about or you put your trust in disappointed you. So I was taught that strength meant katanga true, no show them said you when it actually does. So that's like the good part and that bad part about I would say Caribbean strength. We tend to be put on, right? Guan like say it don't bother you when it actually does. So as we would say, put on a good face and katanga true, but that's something I learned in terms of what strength looked like was to do that when now on this journey, I realized that's actually not strength. It's weakness. How has being Caribbean immigrant shaped my view on self-sacrifice? Ooh, that I feel like that's a loaded question as well. Because self-sacrifice is in the Caribbean culture, I would say our first gear, right? That is the first gear in which we drive. We sacrifices ourselves for the greater good of many. And as Jamaicans, we would say out of many, one people. So self-sacrifice is our first gear. It's our first approach when achieving a goal. Don't do what's best for you. Do what's best for the multitude, essentially your family. So it definitely taught me the importance of community and family and sacrificing yourself to ensure the well being of everyone else, which is important. I think often in this new culture, we can move very selfishly, but there is a balance. There is a place where you should be selfish in your wellness and your well being, while also knowing that self sacrifice doesn't necessarily have to be the detriment or to it doesn't have to diminish who you are as a person. Self-sacrifice could also just mean not necessarily moving forward with the plan you felt was best for yourself, but what is best for everyone. So self-sacrifice is not always a bad thing, but that's why I think it's very important that we are in tune with our own wellness and emotions and what that actually means because self sacrifice and selfishness has a very weird relationship. Let's just say it is intertwined based on who you're talking to or your environment or the circumstance, right? Because there would be situations where I felt that I sacrificed myself for the betterment of my family, not my current family as a mom and a wife, but my immediate family. And others would say it's selfish because you didn't do it in the exact same way in which we wanted you to do. So I think the compass there is truly knowing what is best in terms of your wellness, right? How do you feel, right? And that actually ties in very much with what I was taught about strength. And strength does not mean to forego your emotions and put on because I think often we unknowingly focus on what the perception of our emotions are versus what our actual emotions are. So, for example, we don't want to appear to be bothered by someone being offensive or appear to be bothered by someone's decision that has impacted you. So instead of focusing and honoring your emotions by saying, I am affected, I am hurt, I am bothered by this person's actions or words, we put on, right? We do the perception of, and in the Caribbean culture, that is seen as strength. Yes, na make them see sa them barayo kotanga true, and that is seen as strength when it actually is not because it is hurting you internally. So I don't see that as strength anymore, but that's what I was taught as a child. And last but not least, how did growing up a Caribbean immigrant shape my views on womanhood? Oh my, I would say it shaped my views so much. I was blessed to have so many amazing women in my life that were not only gorgeous and dressed down, always was ready to be at the top of their game or walk on a red carpet because you know nothing about Black women and especially Caribbean women. We take our appearance seriously. And I love that about us because even when circumstances and our environment doesn't allow true wellness internally, because of whatever circumstance, we always put forth our best self. And to me, that is a form of self love when you have little to no control. If you can only give yourself and put yourself together as the best, you're on your way, girl. You on your way. But slow and steady will get to a place where as equally as well as we looked. But I hope that for all my Black women, how has it shaped womanhood? It definitely shaped it in such a beautiful way that I am so excited to be a woman. I think I always say that one of the true blessings in life is to be a Black woman. You hear me? Toot toot. So I am truly blessed. And it showed me not only the benefits of being a woman, but the responsibility of being a woman. To be a woman in a household with or without children, with or without a partner, you are the essence of that home. Who you are as a woman is the bliss, the feeling, is the emotion that make that house, that apartment, whatever dwelling a home. A woman makes a building, any shelter, a home because there is something about women that we innately are not only nurturers, we are light, we are fire. And that light and that fire and that essence of a woman makes any space a beautiful space. So I learned that growing up as a woman, but I also learned that we often sacrifice ourselves in ways that we don't realize have long term effects to our emotional well being, how we can sit in this stagnant place of fight or flight and we can create scenarios in which we're always anxious. We're always ready to defend when there's nothing to defend, speaking for myself. But I've learned a lot, both good and bad, about being a woman as a Caribbean woman. Just so you haven't noticed, I didn't go through and read every single question prior to recording because I wanted you to see my genuine reactions to your questions. This unfiltered, I wanted it to be similar to an in person conversation, no prep. I love that question, so I'm going to read it again. What was a pivotal moment that made you realize your passion now meets your purpose? Oh my gosh, there were so many pivotal moments. So I have always been a communicator. I love speaking and meeting new people. I have truly learned so much from human beings. And as someone who loves reading books and went to college, I really believe that some of the best education and knowledge out there lives in the experiences of others because we can read about something, we can do the research and also like interview people, but the way in which we individually move along in life, what was the pivotal moment, right? I just don't want to go on a rant. What was the pivotal moment that made me realize that my passion aligned with my purpose? I had so many there. So I'm going to talk about one that stands out right now. For the first time in my life, as you guys may know, I travel quite a bit for work, right? I could travel in terms of airport, commuting by myself, but usually when I land, I meet up with my team and the client and things like that. I've never gone on a solo trip on my own. I am a serial entrepreneur. I had my first business when I was 24, 25 years old. I closed that business, continued to focus on my family and my corporate career. I then started another business in the, I want to say early 2007, 2009, then closed that business and started my podcast in 2021. So I always knew that my purpose was aligned with helping people through my creativity. I never really understood the importance of communication. So I interned at Hot 97. I always loved radio. Radio was my medium of choice just because I'm a kid of the 90s and grew up in Brooklyn, New York. So we listened to Angie Martinez, 106 in Park Kid, and then all the new songs dropped with Flag. So I always loved the radio. I felt like the radio kept me in touch with what was going on in the culture, what was going on in music, WBLS, The Quiet Storm is where I used to get all of my R&B jams from. So I always loved radio. I always loved this medium. I started to listen to podcasts in college. So I always say that this podcast is more aligned with a traditional podcast versus the new age of podcasts, because traditional podcasts always operated similar to a talk show, just in audio. So there were reoccurring segments, there were proper openings, there were a full breath show in the middle, and then a close out and takeaway. I'm saying all this to say that my passion always followed me in every season of my life. I just because life was lifing, I never understood how to monetize that passion, right? Because I genuinely enjoyed it. And I felt like this was not something to monetize. I love talking to people. I love being on the radio. So I was a part of the radio station team in my university, which is Long Island University. And I just loved it. It was sincerely my passion. I never saw it as something that can generate income in the way that aligned with the lifestyle that I wanted to live. Granted, we saw the Angie Martinez, the Oprahs, and Ricky Lakes of the world, but I felt like that was required another trajectory in which, unfortunately, my life didn't allow. I didn't have that level of privilege. I don't think privilege is the right word, but that just wasn't my career path because I faced so much adversity early on in my life. I just felt that was unattainable to me in that way. I knew very early on that I would have my own talk show and that my passion for communication and connecting with people would put me exactly where God wanted to use me. That I did know very early on. In terms of how my passion aligns with purpose, I wanted to come back to the solo trip. So totally burned out, post pandemic traveling a lot for work, my doing all the things that I need to do for my daughters and my household and my husband. I was just like, I need a solo trip. I need to sit down and turn my brain off. Fun fact, it is not an easy task to turn my brain off. So I need to wind down pretty early in the night in order to be sleeping when it's time to sleep because my mind just goes all the time. I'm a woman of ideas and I like information. That's the sidebar. So long story short, I go on this solo trip. And of course, because it's my first solo trip, I decided to go back home to Jamaica. I was like, I'm not going to go on a solo trip and go to an island that I've never been to before. I need, if God forbid something happens, there are not only my family that lives on the island, my husband and everyone around. It's easy to get to, and we have enough connections to make sure everything is seamless. Anyway, so that is me just trying to psych myself in and out of why I ended up going to Jamaica for my solo trip. End up going to this solo trip. And I got there and I'll never forget it that I had a session with my therapist at the time when I got there, and I just couldn't be settled. Couldn't settle myself. I don't know why. I had nothing to do. I was in a hotel room, beautiful hotel, and couldn't settle myself. I was just like, oh, I could use this time to do something for the podcast. I can use this time to finish working on the game. I just couldn't settle myself. And I remember having that session and she really helped me realize that God brought me here for a reason and I need to trust in his plan for my life and stop doing all the things. Planning, coordinating, organizing. When they say faith without works is dead, you also need to realize that faith comes before your work. So I needed to learn in that moment that I needed to stop working, that he was trying to show me that he is God, is the director of my path. And I just need to focus on the details, right? Because I'm not the director of my path. But even then, I was hard headed and didn't realize, right? So we're at this hotel. I'm having a hard time relaxing. Had a session with my therapist and decided that I'm going to leave the room. I'm going to leave all my devices. I'm going to go sit by the pool, going to have a cocktail and just be. I'm going to force myself to just be. I go out to the pool area. I actually didn't go out to the main pool area where everyone is. This is the S Hotel in Montego Bay, a beautiful hotel, by the way. So I go out to the S Hotel and they have an exclusive, like, they have a secondary pool out on a balcony on my floor. So the main pool is downstairs where everyone is with the cabanas and everything. But there's a secondary pool that's high up on the second floor that typically doesn't have anyone there. So I said, yeah, I'm going to go there because I just want to be by myself and just hear God. I get there, there's three people around, but I find a seat close to myself by myself. I get a drink and I'm just there relaxing, truly like winding down and being. I get up to go and replenish my drink, and I didn't put my sandals back on because, again, there's three of us up here. So I'm just like barefooted, tiptoeing back to the bar, which only was like a few feet away. I tiptoe to the back to the bar, not realizing how hot the pool deck is. So on my way back, I'm like, oh, ouch, 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 to myself, tiptoeing, running back. So this gentleman comes up to me, this older white gentleman comes up to me. He goes, you didn't think that was true, did you? And we both started to laugh. And I said, no, I really did. And long story short, we ended up being in a 3-hour conversation about him, his life, his wife, his children, and his wife eventually joined us. And throughout the conversation, he got really emotional. And his wife said to me, I've been with this man for 40 something, 50 years, and no one has ever pegged him as accurately as you had in this conversation. And in the conversation, I was just pouring into him saying he had this very, I've done all the great things in life and I'm done. And I don't know what to do. And I was just like, you're not done. It's a pause. You've done such extraordinary things in your life. Why are you saying that it is over when you aren't the decider of it being over? And you clearly have a loving wife and family and everyone around you that supports you. Why are you getting your own way? And through the duration of this conversation, I was learning from him so much, just how he was able to, and come to find out he was originally from Brooklyn. But when he was in Brooklyn, I was not even a thought in my mother's belly. But it was so interesting how we had similar views and experiences of Brooklyn while it being almost 10, 20 years difference from when we both was in that space. And long story short, that conversation, like he said, changed his perspective on life and how he was going to go back home. And his wife was just so excited about meeting me and us just having this moment. And it really showed me that God is using you. Just put down the things, put down the planning, stop being type A crazy person and allow God to use you. Because in this conversation, he was so grateful and excited and thanking me for just, he kept saying, thank you for letting me bother you for so long. And I was like, you're not bothering me. I'm learning. I learned so much from him in terms of how he was able to pivot, not once, not twice, but 3 times throughout his career as someone who didn't finish college and achieve extraordinary success. Granted, there are components of that that's privilege, right? And that is just the system that we live in, that God willingly we were changed. Side. He was afraid every single time he was going to fail. Every single time he dealt with imposter syndrome and he felt that he was going to be outed. Someone's going to find out that I didn't really go to school for this. Someone's going to find out that I just studied the books and now that I know. And each and every time he found significant success. So I say all that to say that I know that my passion is aligned with my purpose because every single room God puts me in, I have an experience like that. It is kismet. I used to say it's crazy, but then I realized how offensive crazy the term is. But it is breathtaking for me sometimes that I end up in these spaces, sometimes intentionally and not intentionally, and have these world changing conversations with strangers. And as much as they thank me for pouring into them, they pour into me equally. And I know in certainty that is God's purpose over my life is that he wants to use me in a way to not only unite his people, but remind them of their greatness and that every experience and adversity that we go through, it is something that he is intentionally put in our paths to craft us and mold us for our ultimate purpose. So hopefully that answered the question, which is what was the pivotal moment? I've had so many pivotal moments similar to that one that I talked about in the solo trip. I just came back from Afrotech. And I had so many of those moments that I can't even count on one hand. And I intentionally went to Afrotech with little to no agenda, right? I went to Afrotech with an itinerary in terms of when I was going to go, when I was going to leave, and maybe one party I was definitely going to because I bought a ticket. And funny enough, that party was a great party, but it also taught me that the direction that I wanted my career to go into is not the direction that God wants my career to go into. So I say all that to say that these pivotal moments happen in my life all the time. And because I have become accustomed to it, I am more aligned to see it. I move at a pace that allows me to hear his directions, see when he's moving in my life, and see when God's saying, look, pay attention. This is a thing. This is a person, to the point that he was sending people that I needed to talk to me. I know it sounds crazy, but one day I'll write a book and go into detail. It is absolutely true that he aligns my path. So going back to what I was saying about Afrotech, I went to Afrotech, which is a 4-day, 4-day conference. And I went with my executive pass, and I knew the sessions during the conference that I wanted to attend, and I only planned one party. Keep in mind, this is a 4-day conference that has at minimum 3 parties per day. And I received all the spreadsheets that got all the invitations from different brands, from different partners in my career. And because, to be honest, I was overwhelmed with it all, I decided that I wasn't going to do any of it. I was going to go with the flow and let God lead me to where I needed to be and not make any plans. I bought a ticket for one party that popped up while I already had my Afrotech plans in place. This was party, I'm trying not to specifically say the party and the brand, but this party popped up in Houston while I was already planning to be in Houston. I went to this party previously when it was in another state. So I said, listen, this is again kismet, this is God's work. Let me buy a ticket. Let me go to this party. Party was wonderful. People hosting the party was wonderful. But everything that happened leading up to this party confirmed that the direction I thought that my career was going to go in terms of who I should partner with, in terms of the next directions, is not the direction God wanted me to go. It was very much think bigger. I have more for you. And think differently. So while I went to the party and I had a lovely time, I will no longer be pursuing that route because God has made it very clear that I need to go in another route. So that is one of many pivotal moments that has happened that reassured that I am aligned with my purpose. So next question. And then I think we are again in a how did we only get through? I think we did 3 or 4 questions. So I will definitely record a part 3 because I want to get through these questions. And you know what? We're going to do one more question and then I'll tell you about what's to come in season 3. So we're going to make the unfiltered Q&A 3 parts. And then then I'll tell you more about what is to come in season 3. Oh, we going to be so different. Okay. Can you share a personal story of struggle and how it contributed to your growth as a person and a leader in your community? Can I share a personal story? Oh, I have so many of them. What personal story will I share that contributed to my growth as a person and a leader in my community? Which story should I tell? That's what's difficult. I will tell the story of what story should I tell? I'll tell the story of what it's like to be a mom, right? I'll use that as my closing story because there are so many different seasons in my life that I can tell a story that has really pushed me towards personal growth, especially in being a leader. But I think a lot of those stories involve other people. And while the experience is mine, they also have, I'm considerate of their mention in the story. So I'll tell a story about being a mom, right? If you're new here, I have 2 daughters, 16 and 11, and it is truly a blessing to be their moms. I feel like I was chosen to be a mother to these 2 girls because they are so different and while so alike in the most unique ways. My oldest daughter is a overachiever, textbook overachiever, and will one day rule the world. 100%. You heard it here first. And my youngest daughter has special needs because she has a speech impediment, but is also the smartest 11-year-old I know and the most emotionally intelligent human I have ever come across just because she is so intuitive. And in addition to her being so intuitive, she trusts her emotions. She trusts who she is and her perspective on a situation. She's not easily moved or impressed. And baby, I learn from her every day. I love her so much. So, a story of a struggle that I'm going to share is when we lived in Texas. We were in Texas for my husband's career, and I was very pregnant with a 3.5 year old daughter, and I was having a difficult pregnancy. I was sick all the time. I was bedridden. And if you are new here, I'm rather short. I'm 5'5". So I was like a little mobile house. I was huge and short. And we had such a difficult time in Texas. And while my husband and my mother-in-law came out to make it better, it was hard being in these spaces. We were like aliens. And I tell the story about how this older Latin woman followed me around in the supermarket because she was mesmerized by my hair. At the time, I had my hair out curly. It was just such a hard time. That year was just such a hard time mentally and emotionally. And what it taught me was one, the gap. It taught me how I saw in real time how being divisive could thrive in a community, how being not like us and, oh, I don't know anything about these kind of people and they look different and they talk different. As an adult, I was shocked by the blissfulness of the ignorance. And in a way that made me curious about how do you live this way thinking that everyone should be just like you? And everyone should look just like you, operate just like you, believe in what you believe in. And throughout my experience, I had my OBGYN there. I gave birth to my daughter there. So I had the privilege of meeting different people in various professions, as well as like my husband's profession. And I had so many conversations with them to the point that they would come to me and be like, oh, Sneaker, look, did you know about this that happened right here in Texas? And this part of Texas was Mexico. And did you know that? And so people would bring me history that wasn't in the books. They would tell me about stories, about families, and the reasons why they felt the way that they did, and why essentially their perspective was so narrow because they weren't given the privilege of anything else. So while it was such a hard time for me individually as a mom, and as a wife, and really afraid that I wasn't going to be able to bring forth a healthy, beautiful child, I was also learning. I was also being thrusted in this environment that, while initially wasn't welcoming, became invested in my belonging. And I thank everyone that I came across and my neighbors and everyone that really decided to no longer see me as the Black woman with cute curly hair and cute kid, but as a friend and a person that belonged in this community, to the point that they wanted to feed me the information and they wanted me to understand and they wanted me to understand how and why they came to this perspective versus just seeing them as ignorant individuals. So while that was, I can say, undeniably like one of the hardest times in my life because I was very pregnant on bed rest, hearing all of the bad things that could potentially be of my child, it was the most stressful time in my life. And thank God brought forth my daughter healthy and with her challenges, still a bright, amazing human being, my beacon, as I call her. She is everything true in this world, 100%. During that time of struggle, God still used me to show me that even if they don't look like you and they don't understand you, initially treated you like a them, this is how you being you, me being me, is all you need to create community. And I remember leaving where we lived, and everyone did a farewell celebration for us and hope that we stayed in touch. It was remarkable to see that 180 turn from who are these Black people to, oh my God, our people are leaving. And that was just another pivotal moment in my life where I realized God has a purpose over my life to unite people and also help them come to understand that in our differences, we are so much alike. And that's why we're here on this podcast, exploring definitions so that we can come to understand that as our own personal definitions change and evolve and shift, so can others. And that doesn't make them a label of anything. It just makes them a human. And how do we use our differences to unite us and also bring everyone into the conversation? Because everyone should be informed and also feel welcomed because they belong. So that is the last question that I will answer on part 2 of Unfiltered. How do you define Q&A? And before I let you go, I want to give you some tidbits about season 3. So we are going to wrap up this season after part 3 of Unfiltered Q&A. We will be closing out season 2 of How Do You Divine because season 3, I am so excited for season 3. I'm so excited for everything that God has really aligned for season 3, and it's going to be magical. It is going to be more and more like the vision that God has placed on my heart for this platform. So I'm super excited for season 3. I'm so sorry that we weren't able to give you as many episodes as we'd like to in season 2, because season 2 is what I considered from the ground floor. Season 1 was from the table. And I'll talk about this more in season 3 when you see all that is to come. Because when I tell you, it'll be a new space, it'll be a new vision. And I hope you guys are excited and proud when you see it. So before I let you go, we have to talk about the vibe of the week. What's the vibe of the week? So this week, because I had such a remarkable time at Afrotech, I more and more see the direction God is putting me in regards to this podcast, in regards to my career as a sales strategist in technology, as and as a founder. I went right back to this song, and it has been running in my mind. And I hope you love it and give it all the streams. The vibe of the week this week is called Be All Right by Evan and Chris, Stephen and Malcolm on the Seasons album. They just making room for what I'm on now. I just want to know the one who does know how. Oh, wow. Said just running the game for a mission I already know. Wow. I love this song. It reinforces the fact that we are not in control. God already has your direction lined out. So focus on the details. And they just making room for what I'm on now. I'm running through it. I know the one who does know how. Oh, wow. It's like I'm running the game with the maker I already know now. That's me and the name on us. I know that we all gonna be alright. We gonna make it through if it takes the whole night. You hear my voice? We still jamming. Although we lost touch with my voice. You can see the blessings coming my way. Blessings on blessings, yeah. I see the blessings coming our way. Blessings on. The vibe of the week is Be Alright by Evan, Chris, and Stephen Malcolm on the Seasons album. And I definitely wanted to leave you guys with something that I'm jamming out this week. Someone actually DM'd me that sometimes my vibe of the week is not gospel music. I think in the last episode, we had some hip hop and R&B. And every time I think of someone having a problem with me, your problem with me, focus on the you in that problem. Because I don't have a problem. See, the thing is, Jesus didn't go into church to find his disciples. He found them outside. He also taught us a lot about judgment. So I'll leave you with that while we jam out to Be All Right. And this is How Do You Divine Q&A Unfiltered. See you on the next one. Bye.